Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Meet VCU Authors. My name is Christina Stanch, and I'm delighted to welcome you during this nice distraction the day before election. And I'm sending everyone love and patience for this week. Before I start introducing today's speaker and giving you a little bit more about today's event, I wanted to also say Happy Indigenous Month, which started on Friday, and invite you to join us this month to several wonderful events in our On Native Ground initiative. So welcome to Meet VCU Authors, and this is our last event in this series for the semester. We'll resume in February, and I'm just delighted to learn more about our colleague Rebecca Gibson's work and to celebrate it, because these events also are celebratory. And as many of you know, this Meet VCU Author series invites not just VCU community members, the faculty, students, and staff, but also members of the Richmond community. We also have some members of the audience from outside of the state of Virginia and internationally. So our audience is also growing. They meet VCU authors as they talk about their publications and also answer questions about their work. We'll talk for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have ample time for Q&A. So please, as your questions emerge, as Rebecca discusses her book, use either the Q&A function or the chat function and post your question or comments. So today I'm happy to introduce our colleague Rebecca Gibson, who will present her new book, one of her two recent books, Cyborgs, Ethics, and the Matrix, Simulations of Sex and Gender, published earlier this year in the Palgrave Studies in Representing Gender with Palgrave Macmillan. Congratulations, Rebecca. Dr. Rebecca Gibson, if you don't know her yet, and I understand Rebecca joined VCU as a full-time faculty member only 2 years ago, so some of you may not be familiar with her work. She's an assistant teaching professor of anthropology in the School of World Studies at VCU. She received her PhD in anthropology from American University in 2017, and here at VCU teaches courses from medical anthropology and forensic and biological anthropology to religion, magic, and witchcraft, and my favorite title, The Anthropology of Tea. I would love to hear more about that class. Dr. Gibson's research, as you'll learn today, spans a broad range of topics from historical biological anthropology to whether or not zombies have gender, to cyborgs and robotic technology. Her published books include The Corseted Skeleton, Bioarchaeology of Binding, Palgrave Macmillan 2020, Global Perspectives on the Liminality of the Supernatural from Animus to Zombie, Lexington Books 2022, and the book she'll be discussing today, Cyborgs, Ethics, and the Matrix, Simulations of Sex and Gender, just published this year. Next semester, we'll welcome Rebecca again to talk about her second book published this year called The Bed Corset, a Feminist Reimagining from Bloomsbury. When Rebecca is not teaching or writing, we've learned she reads mystery novels amidst a pile of stuffed animals. Rebecca, welcome to Meet VC Authors. It's so lovely to finally meet you.
Thank you so much. It is absolutely fantastic to be here and to present this work to you, which is something I'm massively proud of. And then I will also tell you how and why and when I met Keanu Reeves. So this one's going to be a fun one. This book really started in 1999 when I was an 18-year-old watching The Matrix for the first time. If you haven't seen The Matrix, I am honestly quite shocked. It has become a cultural icon, with the verbiage of The Matrix and some of the lines from it diffusing into society and really creating a zeitgeist that references it quite a bit. If you've heard things like I've taken the red pill, or if you've heard things like a glitch in the Matrix, then this is what you're referencing. And the beginnings are here in 1999 with Trinity, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, and Neo, played by Keanu Reeves. This was the Wachowskis', I want to say, third feature film, and it's probably their most famous. And this was pre-transition for both of the Wachowskis. We'll come back to their transition in a moment. But I honestly say that none of us throughout this really knew what we were getting into in terms of how far this would go as a cultural icon. What we thought back in the 90s was, this is really cool. This is introducing the idea of cyberpunk to a wider generation, and this is making this, shiny, tight PVC and kung fu and all of this stuff look awesome with the thinking man's superhero. The Matrix was not just about kicking ass, although that was part of it. It was also about philosophy. So you've got cyberpunk, you've got the philosophy of the Matrix, and you've got this start to all of this that came after. And when I say the start, it really was. Previous to this, we had seen cyborgs, we had seen people with machine parts in their bodies in other things, but this was the first one that really made it human, that really made us think, well, what if we are part of a simulation? What if we are all plugged into this computer program together? What responsibilities do we have with this? The Matrix is a story of one man who can change the world and how he finds out that even though he is the one, he's not in this only by himself. Being part of that simulation all plugged in together necessarily implies the fact that we need to cooperate. We need to work together to overturn things that are improper or things that are harmful to us. So this is the beginnings. Throughout the first movie, we get explorations of gender. Neo, our hero, is told that he's been living in a dream, that nothing about his physical reality, nothing about his physical form even, is as he thought it was. So he has a mental change in seconds when he is told, you've been living in a dream, none of this is accurate, your body isn't the way it is. And we can see what it means to be human, what it means to be embodied, what it means to be engendered, to have a gender, through the explorations that are done within this movie. There's even a non-binary character in this movie, so it moves beyond the binary, beyond male and female. There's a non-binary character called Switch. She was originally supposed to be a man in the world of the real world and a woman in the world of the Matrix. So we have this transitory nature of all of the ideas about gender that are going into the movie. And we have ideas about what it means to be human as well. The way that this explores what it means to be human is we take Neo, he's in this simulation, he gets woken up out of this simulation, and he realizes that he has plugs that are integrated into his body. He's not purely flesh and blood human anymore. He is a cyborg, and he has to come to terms with the fact that in order to be who he is, he needs to internalize that he has a cyborg nature, that he is not just human, that he is in fact the one and can do things that are better and more powerful than any human possibly could. This idea of simulation versus reality is really addressed by looking at the concept of what reality is. Morpheus, who is pictured here on the left-hand side, played by Lawrence Fishburne, asks Neo, what is reality? If we can smell something, if we can touch it, if we can taste it, isn't that thing as real as anything else? And so Neo learns that there is less of a separation between that simulation and, quote, reality than he might have thought. that all of the people who are still living plugged into the matrix, that's their reality. That's what they live on a day-to-day basis. So whatever gender they are, whatever embodiment they have, whatever ideas they hold, for fill out and form that reality. I will confess my 18-year-old self still thinks this is the coolest thing ever, that I got the chance to write about this. But as I moved past being 18, as I moved through getting a degree in philosophy as one of my undergraduate degrees, and as I moved into graduate work, I really started to think about that desire to push the boundaries between human and machine. Part of this process was getting diagnosed with a genetic disease that is progressive and that really requires a lot of maintenance, including in my particular case at the moment, using a mobility scooter, which is about as close as I'm probably going to get to being a cyborg myself. So the desire to push the boundaries between human and machine, to see how far we can integrate machines into our body, into our reality, and then to take a look at the limitations of the world and ask, what if those didn't apply? What if we could, as Neo does in the simulation of the world that is the Matrix, what if those didn't apply to me? What if we could push those boundaries? What if we could think beyond the limitations that we currently are living under? And of course, I love to discuss the idea of sexuality. This is one of my research interest that really crosses time and space, crosses all of the different types of research that I do, is to think about how and why our attraction to each other, to robots, to AI companions, or what have you, how that makes us human, how we exist as sexual humans within this framework. And in the movie, we have this contrast between the podborn, like Neo, those who have those plugs in the backs of their necks and on their arms and legs, and the children of Zion. Zion is a city in the world of the Matrix that is closer to the center of the earth. It's still warm, it's not under the control of the machines, but it creates this divide between who can enter the Matrix, who can access the power of the cyborg nature, and who is seen as purely human. And each side of this kind of has their own idea about where each side fits in the hierarchy. Children of Zion can see themselves as more purely human. And the question here is, what is a human? And can humans and cyborgs really ever love each other and really ever intermingle, so to speak? And then we have the podborn, who actually can access more of the world around them than the children of Zion. They're the only ones who can re-enter the Matrix. They're the only ones who can do death-defying feats like jump off of buildings and survive, or even fly in the case of Neo. So we have this question of who's human, who's a cyborg, and why do these things matter in terms of the way we relate to each other in our own lives. In the original Matrix trilogy, the machines are a necessary enemy. The war between the humans and the machines has been going on for decades, even centuries at this point. And the machines are seen as a necessary enemy. They're somebody to fight against, but they're also where the humans get their replenished population, because the machines are growing humans to use as fuel, to use as generation of body heat. And that's how the machines keep their power. So the machines provide humans for the Matrix people to free. The Matrix people, unaware and inadvertently, provide electricity to the machines. And there's this interdependency that really is evocative of the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene, if you're not aware of this, is a relatively clearly defined boundary between when humans had less of an impact on our world and the climate and the way things have changed around us, and more of an impact. It starts around about the Industrial Revolution with the advent of factories and trains and filling the skies with coal dust. And since then, we have seen this increase in global warming, this increase in interdependency between machines and humans in the world that we currently live in. It can set up an us versus them dichotomy. So we are here against the machines that we are also currently using. See that interdependency? We're also currently using to make our phones and our cars and our computers and all of the things that benefit. But we're also seeing an increase in climate change. So it's an us versus them, but also an interdependency. Throughout all of this, we see a trans metaphor inside the world of the Matrix. But trans what? So we've already discussed that there was a non-binary character. During the last 25 years or so, Lilly and Lana Wachowski both came out as transgender. Lilly came out first, but she was outed. I'm sorry, Lana came out first, but she was outed without her permission during the early 2000s. Then Lilly came out years later, and it's since reinforced the fact that the Matrix is in fact a trans metaphor. And it's very transgender metaphor as well. You can be whomever you want to be within the Matrix simulation. The world is as you make it, even once you are woken up from the Matrix, or maybe especially when you woke up from the Matrix, because now you understand the wholeness of the fact that the world is as you make it. But it's also a transhumanism metaphor. And transhumanism is this concept of how far can we push this integration of human and machine before humans become not really human, something else. Excuse me, transhuman. And so we come to the main technological thrust of the book that I wrote, looking at the medical technology, or how we do integrate technology such as robotics, computers, etc., into our daily lives and into our bodies. From the original movie, the 1999 movie, we have three main things that we can look at as technology that already existed, but also things that we have in some ways really failed to think of as advancing the transhumanism narrative. The first is we have intubation. This is pictured on the screen and is very much what Neo and the rest of the people who are plugged into the Matrix go through. They're completely intubated, they are in a chemically induced coma, and the machines do all of the breathing and excreting of waste for them. And the feeding as well, of course. The pacemaker, we sort of have a reverse pacemaker in terms of the Matrix, because the beating of the heart, the generation of body heat is what's keeping the machines going. But we also have the artificial womb with those pods that Neo woke up in, that you can see in the massive generators. We have this concept of the artificial womb. And artificial wombs are, in fact, a viable technology, at least for animals in the late stages of gestation. The one pictured here is done for sheep, and for the most part, sheep is how they are used experimentally, not practically. They're still very, very expensive. But this is the type of medical technology that has really come a long way since the 1990s, and that we find is still extremely useful to this day. In fact, pacemakers just recently got a massive overhaul. The battery was really improved by a recent team of researchers. I think this was just back in 2015 or so, where they changed the life cycle of the pacemaker battery, meaning that there will be less need for intensive and invasive surgery for pacemaker replacements. This is incredible because that was the problem that pacemaker technology has been facing, is making it less invasive. So the medical technology both stems from the original movie, but is also um, an influence on the movie and on the series as a whole. Throughout the book, I'm also looking at the interstitial properties from the Matrix franchise and other properties that are connected to them. I won't go into this very much in depth, but I just want you to be aware that the Animatrix, the game, which is called Enter the Matrix, and the Matrix comics all give backstory to the universe, and some of them give backstory to the characters. They're not just in-name only tie-ins, they're also a part of the larger canon, and they also contribute massively to the philosophy, to our understanding of the technology, and to the fact that when the Wachowskis created this, they really created an entire universe, not just a standalone movie. Also up on the screen is a like a time map or a personality map to the Wachowskis' property Cloud Atlas. The Wachowskis collaborated with David Mitchell, who was the author of the book Cloud Atlas, to bring that movie to the screen. And then decades later, when we get to The Matrix Resurrections, which is the newest Matrix movie, it more firmly ties into it. And I will come back to how in a moment. But first, we have The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, the second and third movies in the series. Honestly, there's not much to say about them. They weren't very good. Most of the fans didn't like them. They did almost nothing to progress the plot, except for the fight between the machines and the humans. They were pretty widely panned across the board. But they did serve to get us to the point where we understood that Neo had to die in order for there to be some sort of machine-human truce. He was the one. He was the one who could save everybody. One is also an anagram of Neo. And he did so by dying in the last movie in the original trilogy, The Matrix Revolutions. So for the rest of the franchise, for the second and third movies, and also within the realm of the fourth movie, we get a larger focus on certain newer and new advanced types of medical technology. The first of which is they show cephalopod technology, the ability to move things in a tentacle-like behavior, the ability to camouflage. All of these things come from new advances in robotics technology that are seen in the second, third, and fourth movie. We also do see longer battery life. The nodes on Neo's neck and arms change in the fourth movie. They change again in they change in the beginning of the fourth movie. They change again when he meets the new people on his new ship. They have more advanced ones than even he does. And we see this better integration of the machines into the body, this rise of medical technology that is both decorative and practical, and all of these things are influenced by these ideas that formed in the Matrix that show us that they can be done. So we come to the fourth movie 20 years later. We have that newer interface technology like I talked about. We have a mature love story. It apparently took 20 years for the Wachowskis to figure out how people talk to each other, but they did it. And we have machines on our side. We have machines and humans working together in what is much more an authentic cyborg experience, integrating machines not only into the body, but also into the society as well. We see love as well as sex. In the first three movies and in the interstitials, there wasn't really that much of either. We have Trinity and Neo who are said to be in love, but it's a very subtle, subdued, and not very active or demonstrative love. Whereas in the fourth movie, we get this real feeling that they're connecting as two human beings, despite the fact that they're both plugged into the Matrix at the time. But we also get that uncanny factor. Neo and Trinity have been, as the title suggests, resurrected. They've been brought back to life. And so, on some subsurface level, they understand that their world is not as it seems. They don't feel correct. They don't feel exactly human. So, we have the uncanny valley factor in here as well. This asks the question, what if we're all cyborgs? What if everybody involved in our lives is part of that simulation? What are the consequences of that? And what responsibilities do we have to each other if we're all cyborgs? But if we're all cyborgs, then it kind of doesn't matter. We all exist on the same simulation. We all exist in a way that allows us to treat each other as humans. So it might end up just not mattering. In the first movie, we get this quote: to deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. And the character at the time, who is Mouse, is talking about sex. He has just offered Neo a private session with a very sexy program in a red dress, like blonde bombshell, and Neo doesn't really want this, but Mouse says to deny our own impulses is to deny the very thing that makes us human. In the fourth movie, what we get in terms of those impulses are very human. We have the impulse toward kindness, generosity, caring, and fellow feeling. And these are things that makes Neo an atypical superhero. He is affectionate, he's kind, he's giving, and he's loving. We see desire and pair bonding and love and attraction. Instead of just sex, we see the romantic side of things. We see the desire to be part of a whole. And we see protection, defense, and mitigation. So I mentioned that the first movie had a lot of ass kicking. The fourth movie, rather, Neo acts in defense, in protection, in the mitigation of the dangers to the people that he loves, much, much more than he acts aggressively. In fact, if you've seen Star Wars, he does what one could consider a force push, where he uses his world-changing abilities to just push people off to the side or away from him instead of reaching for the guns or the fists first. And then we see what I think is the pinnacle of the idea of cyborg integration. This required us and them. This required human and machine. And these two examples with Kujaku and Subebe and Lexi and Berg really bring that home. Kujaku is pictured with Niobe here. Niobe is played by Jada Pinkett Smith, and she calls him a friend, and she shows people that he is very much on their side, and he is bringing them news that they need. So we have machines and humans working together. And then with Lexi and Berg, we get the real queer plot line. Not that they're necessarily together, but they're familiar with each other and affectionate with each other. And Berg, this is the top photograph, Berg says that Neo is extremely hot and what he's got going on is working for him. And this is taking the queer subtext of the first movie and really making it text. So we have this movement in terms of not only what we can integrate into our lives in terms of the robotics, but also in terms of ideas about sex and gender, ideas about fluidity, ideas about taking that queer subtext and making it text. And this, of course, contrasts to the 1999 film where they had cut the actual trans idea of Switch's male body and female representation to just make her sort of an androgynous, non-binary looking character, because as the Wachowskis said, in 1999, the world wasn't ready for the trans narrative. So this required us and them, and what we are really here is diverse, we are queer, and we are willing to integrate the machines into our lives and into our culture. And where this goes is the intersection of transhumanism and disability. For anybody who did not catch my TED Talk last year, we are all temporarily abled, and most of us in our day-to-day lives use some sort of disability type device. We use glasses, although glasses have kind of slipped off the radar in terms of being a disability aid. We use hearing aids or cochlear implants. We use canes and walkers and wheelchairs. And if you live long enough, you'll probably need at least one of these things. Now, moving into the 21st century, we really need to talk about and think about COVID, particularly with a lot of the similarities to polio and how it is and has become a mass disabling event. So when we talk about the Matrix itself, when we talk about the medical technology that was inspired by the Matrix or that inspired the things in the Matrix, we're talking about the newest generations of this technology and how we can push this narrative further, how we can think about transhumanism, this integration of technology in the body, with our ideas of disability and our ideas of flattening the experience, making it so that these things are normalized, that ideas about gender are normalized, ideas about sex are normalized, and ideas about that intersection of these and disability is normalized. So we come to other uses of cyborg tech. I'm going to focus a little bit on the cybathlon, and then I'm going to talk about medical advances for a second. The cybathlon is really, really cool, but it's also prohibitively expensive. It is basically the disabled Olympics, and you can see a lot of the people who participate in it have created really interesting and wondrous things with their disabilities to demonstrate that these things possibly can be done. In this picture alone, you have someone who's controlling machines with their mind. That's the electrode cap that the gentleman's wearing. You've got somebody who's using a robotic arm to screw in a light bulb, which is incredible in terms of prosthetic technology, which we'll come back to in a second. The this man here is walking with a prosthetic and carrying things and trying to make sure they don't slip off of plates. And my own personal favorite is this one here because my mobility scooter only has a 2-inch clearance. So I'm really jealous of this guy's wheels. I would love to have something that's that practical. And the reason that this is important is because these types of ideas come from fiction like The Matrix, come from the normalization of transhumanism, of how far can we push the human body and how far can we push it before these things are seen as either too human or not human enough. But we have concomitant advances in robotics. We've already talked about biomimicry, about the ability to use different materials in camouflage. We have the external kidney, which is down on the left-hand side of the screen. The external kidney is a real step forward, and hopefully soon it will be available on the market in terms of not only cyborg technology, transhumanism, but also giving people back their lives if they happen to need dialysis. Generally, if you need dialysis, you have to go to a dialysis center. It takes several hours. You have to make sure you keep your appointment. Here, you have this technology that's integrated into your body and worn on a belt, and you can live your life. You don't have to stay in a place that has a center. You don't have to spend several hours of your time, several times a week, getting dialysis. You can live your life. The Luke arm, which is pictured sort of in the middle of your screen here, was developed for the US Army, has 3 different attachment points. So you've got either at the shoulder, at the elbow, or at the wrist. The largest attachment point has 9 sensory motors and can coordinate with your own central nervous system. So there's electrodes where it attaches to the shoulder, and you can use your mind, your central nervous system, to control the arm. To go back for a second to this guy screwing in a light bulb, the demonstration that the Luke Arm website gives us is picking up one of those flimsy water bottles, uncapping it with the other hand, and then using the Luke Arm to bring it up to the person's mouth. And if you've ever used one of those, squishable water bottles, you know how difficult it is to do without spilling, even if you're not using a prosthetic. So prosthetics that can give us the tactile and proprioceptive ability to do things like that are a massive step forward. Here's things I would love to see on my own mobility scooter. I would like to see haptic feedback. I would love to see a charger for my electronics. I've kind of jury-rigged a holder for my cane, but it's not the best. We could work on collapsibility and lightness, and I've also had to rig an alarm system. But these are also things that a lot of people are asking about. Almost every other week in the disability subreddit, I see somebody coming in to do market research to see what would be beneficial for the next generation of disability and accessibility devices. So we should embrace our cyborg nature. We should take a look at our techno dependence and what it's doing with the world, but we should also understand that we are so dependent that it's pretty much entangled at the moment. It'd be very, very difficult to unentangle. And we should ask ourselves if we can love a cyborg, because you probably already do. And normally, this would be where I would stop, but a massive development occurred right after I published this book. So this book came out late July, and in mid-August, Keanu Reeves' band played at the National downtown, which is within easy scooter distance of my apartment. So I decided to go find him. And I got there at about 8:40. I waited for 2.5 hours, and eventually the band did come out at about 10 after 11. And the whole night, security had been saying they're not going to sign anything. They're going straight to New York after this. They're just going to get on the bus. They're not stopping. They're not going to sign anything. You can wait, but don't get your hopes up. They're not signing anything. And I decided that having dignity was really too much of an ask at that point. So I just dropped all my dignity and was like, please, please take this. And I was able to give this book directly to Keanu Reeves. He was very sweet. He deserves all the credit he's ever given for being an absolute gentleman. And he did. He turned around, he heard me, turned around, gave me a wait a second look, went on the bus for a few minutes, came back, signed my Matrix notepad, and took the book from me. And he stayed and signed for the rest of the people in line too. By that point, there were about 70 people waiting outside, and he signed for the rest of the line. So I would like to thank everybody for coming today, to thank the Humanities Research Center for hosting this talk, and invite you to find me on social media and buy all of the rest of my books too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this great presentation. So many ideas and possibilities. So I'll give our audience a few minutes to gather their thoughts and post the questions. But to start us off, can you tell us a little bit more about the main influences and how your research interests up to this point have led to this fascinating project and to the truly transdisciplinary work you're doing, not just in this book, but in your other work?
I just can't decide what it is I want to do with my life. I mean, so far I'm very, very happy to be here at VCU, and I'm glad to be staying at VCU, but I've never been able to tie myself down to one subject or one field or one subtopic or anything like that. I was able to do so for my dissertation, kind of. I wrote about corsets and the effect on the skeleton, but even that was massively interdisciplinary. I don't think you can talk about much in this world as a singular subject. I think there are so many influences and nuances and contexts that, and of course you can't address all of them, but I think attempting to address as many as possible is definitely the way to go. When I was doing my philosophy degree at Indiana University South Bend, even then I wasn't able to choose really, but my strongest ideas in it, my strongest pulls towards classwork and philosophers and things that I found interesting were metaphysics, ethics, and the philosophy of the mind. So what it is that it means for us to be human, what is that it takes for us to be human. And wonderfully enough, that is also the main driving question of anthropology. So when I went on to do my graduate work, that and the connection to bones was made it an easy choice to go into anthropology. And I've been lucky enough that so far, I haven't hit major barriers and continuing to be as interdisciplinary as possible.
Thank you so much for this very generous answer. We have a question that just came in, but before I go there, I just wanted to ask a more general question, which I know you've addressed in part in one of your slides as you were talking about. I'm not sure if the original Matrix or the subsequent ones, but I wanted to go back to your point about ethics and the philosophy of the mind and how, because this is a highly accessible book, and there have been several reviews already praising it for its accessibility and for connecting, general audiences to very important questions, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about what the study might teach us about, or what readers can learn about ethics and technology, about understanding or the use of or the role of popular culture in that endeavor, especially as we are going into pretty uncharted territory with the advent of AI and many other technologies you have discussed. And perhaps because you're an interdisciplinary scholar, navigating social sciences and humanities, I wonder if you could address the role. I know this is a big question and so unfair, but stay with me. The role of the humanities then in this process in not just mitigating or addressing this challenge, but really offering us tools to address this challenge, to cope with it, and maybe to overcome it.
Sure. So everybody loves a hateable villain. And the thing about ethics is that it doesn't ask if something is right or wrong. Right and wrong are the domains of morals. And generally in the US, morality is very, very filtered through religion. And religion is such a broad and often divisive subject, with many permutations, that it's extremely difficult to agree on that. Someone's moral righteousness is somebody else's extremely harmful thing that they never want in a million years. Ethics, on the other hand, doesn't concern itself with right and wrong. Ethics concerns itself with benefit and not benefit or lack of benefit. So when we look at things like popular culture, when we look at things like The Matrix, we shouldn't look to them to tell us what is right and wrong to do. We should look at them with an idea of who's benefiting? How are the villain and the hero interacting together? Is this well written? And does the well writtenness really allow us to have those particular nuances? The original villain in the Matrix franchise is Agent Smith, or at least we think that's the villain. Agent Smith is a computer program whose only purpose in life is to seek out people who have left the Matrix and eliminate them. And this elimination is meant to make it so that nobody else can escape. And despite the fact that it's been co-opted by right-wing, basically the incel movement, the idea of waking up to the reality of what is going on in the Matrix is this idea of understanding that we live in a system and we can change the system if we all put our minds to it, which is really apropos considering tomorrow's election day. So Smith is the anti-change. He wants everything to stay the same. Neo is what comes in and changes it. And you don't get much nuance in the first three movies. In the last movie, though, what you get is a newer version of Smith who is really, really focused um, on maintaining order, but also on the fact that he moves in and out of everybody at will. So he could be anybody. Whereas Neo is this one singular person and he can only be himself. And so, ethically speaking, we want to take a look at who are you as a person? Not just what it means to be human, that's the larger picture, but who are you as a person? What does being you benefit? How can you increase that benefit in the world? How can you make this more personal and also at the same time make it better for the people around you, make it benefit more people around you? So when it comes to things like the recent uptick in language learning models, large language learning models, or the AI that's been used in things like creating those pictures where everybody's got too many fingers, we can take a look at this and say that this is not, ethically speaking, what we want for the future. We don't want to be part of a simulation if everybody is being fooled all the time. We want to wake up to our own realities because uh, the use of the large language learning models and the use of the pictorial AI and the use of all of these things is killing the environment. It's weird. It's like the Matrix got it 1-to-1 at this point, but it's killing the environment. It's only benefiting a very small percentage of people monetarily. It's not benefiting anybody who actually wants to be creative and wants to design new things. And we can change things if we put our mind to it.
Oops, sorry about that. I just muted myself. Thank you so much for this wonderful answer. And as I was looking at the Q&A box here, I think the question I was trying to ask was asked much better by our colleague Mimi Winnick, and I think you've just answered it. I think Mimi framed it in how or why do you think creative works like the Matrix offer particular ways for understanding ethics and the human experience, so much broader than I asked. So I don't know if you wanted to continue this or if you'd like to perhaps move on to the next one.
I can give a short answer before we move on to the next one. The wonderful thing about creative works, about popular culture, about anything that reaches into this particular part of the humanities field is the fact that we at our basis are storytellers. We've always told stories around campfires, around long horse rides or long car trips or whatever. We tell each other stories, we tell ourselves stories.
Yeah.
And this goes back to that tie-in that I mentioned and then didn't come back to, Cloud Atlas, where the main through line of Cloud Atlas is that we are all connected, that everything in the world connects, that we all share humanity, that we all share a goal that is preservation of ourselves and the world around us. And that throughout time, the things that we do resonate, whether they are good or bad, or whether they are beneficial or not beneficial, to take an ethical tack. So the stories that we tell ourselves matter. The things that we talk about matter. And this type of story gives us a way to approach, people who might not have been interested in those ethical implications. One of the things I love about the fourth movie is it's wickedly self-referential. It's incredibly hilarious. It pokes fun at the entire franchise, and it does so in such a way that allows people who might have thought the first three were a little too philosophical to really get interested in that again by its own understanding of itself.
Mhm. Great, thank you so much. We have a long question from Elise Curry, so I'm going to try to summarize if I can. And they start by saying that they've never seen The Matrix, but they're big fans of Star Trek, and they've always wished we could make a body scanner that is actually as effective as the one on the show. And this may be an unfair question, but the question is, do you think that will be happening soon?
Like like it oh
A
like it's
body scanner.
so I don't know. I think ours so the difference between Star Trek and The Matrix, oddly enough, is that the Matrix is mostly grounded in the physical realities of the world. Star Trek is not. Star Trek can has taken the idea of aliens and run with it. Obviously, it's almost all about aliens. It has taken the idea of transporters, which I think is what you're asking about, and run with that. Those things are physically not possible the way they're portrayed in the show. For The Matrix, things like jumping off of buildings and flying, it's about buoyancy. It's about finding the way to buoy ourselves up without necessarily adding so much technology onto the body that we fall again. These things can be worked around. So I would love a transporter, and I would love something like a replicator because I hate grocery shopping and love to cook, but who has the time? So, but the physical fact remains that you cannot create matter out of nothing. And so at this point, probably not. On the other hand, if we ever could create matter out of nothing, it would solve all the world's economic problems, which is also another factor in Star Trek. It's a very socialist narrative. Nobody has to work, everybody can pursue their aptitudes. And the people who do work have enough time to themselves and for leisure time that they can also pursue their aptitudes in addition to their jobs. So I'm all for that particular type of utopia. We just have to solve that pesky E equals MC squared problem.
Yeah, very true. And thank you for that, Rebecca. And there are several strands here. I'm just going to pick one more from Elise Curry's question, and this is about love and sex, and particularly about asexual or non-sexual long-term loving relationships. The question for you, again, probably a little unfair, so it would if you don't want to answer this, of course not. I don't think it's related to the book, but it's something that this audience member in particular finds fascinating. Do you think asexual or non-sexual long-term loving relationships will become more common or at least more supported? I'm not sure if the question is more supported or accepted or supported by whom, but broadly, what is your take on this?
I absolutely hope so. I hope that friend pairings are more accepted. I hope that
Ah.
ace and aro pairings are more accepted. I hope we can stop worrying about what people do if it doesn't affect us. So, speaking from my own experience and then also going sort of bringing it back to the topic of the book with a digression into a conference that I'm a part of, um, as we move forward in our understanding of what it means to be human and how the various permutations of human work out in among ourselves, we can really allow people the space and time to self-define not only their own labels, which are helpful to know that you're not alone in this, but also in their own behaviors and potentially relationship pairings or multiples. I myself am poly. I'm also demisexual, which is a type of, it's considered a gray ace. So it's on the asexuality spectrum. And I am happy to have found my community within this particular label itself, and to know that there's nothing wrong with me. So people who are in polyamorous relationships, people who are in asexual relationships, definitely deserve our place in the relationship spectrum. To that end, I am one of the co-organizers for an international conference, which is called the International Congress on Love and Sex with Robots. We meet annually in Montreal, and everybody from robotics manufacturers to sex tech demonstrators to people who are in caring relationships with their own robotic companions come to our conference, and we get to explore new technology. We get to explore new ways of relationship definition. One of the more interesting things this year was how the menstrual cycle affects the creation of opposite sex online avatars. So do people who menstruate create different male there are different male type avatars for their virtual partners? The answer is yes. And so it's fascinating, and we're getting also towards making slash discovering slash creating new orientations of sexual technology toward people who don't feel the need for a physical human partner, but who do want to experience what sex feels like. So this is a really, and this is a pun, sorry, this is a really fertile field for development. We're really experimenting with new configurations and new ways of thinking about it that will hopefully incorporate every conceivable type of sexuality into the consideration for the technology going forward.
Wonderful answer. Thank you. And what a great conference. I can't wait to hear more about it, both before and after. And since you're new to VCU, I just wanted to mention that there's an AI Futures Lab at the HRC, and I wonder if you're connected. I see some of the members are already in the audience, so they've already connected virtually with you. But I encourage you, if you're not, maybe to reach out to them. Anyway, moving on, we have three more questions, and I think this is all we can take. We are almost at time. The Marilyn Drew Neji's question is whether you're familiar with Donna Haraway's essay, Cyborg Manifesto. And then the question is, do you see connections between Haraway's ideas and the ideas that animated the Matrix franchise?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely adore and respect Haraway's work. Multiple connections between this idea of cyborgs as empowerment and the fact that we are all to some degree cyborgs. It's really fascinating to see the evolution of it as well, because we have these ideas that were in their relative infancy in the 1990s that are really coming to fruition as the technology and the ideology come together. The unfortunate thing is with the practical side of things, so putting aside Haraway for a second, but with the practical side of things, there's still a lot of kinks to work out, because we have things like people who really want to embrace their cyborg nature to a physical degree and to integrate some of the technology into their body, but who are then left with things like there's a gentleman who has a robotic eye, and the company no longer supports the software, so his eye no longer works. So again, this melding of conceptualization, theory, and then the practicality is something that the newer generation of transhumanists are really attempting to work out.
Thank you so much. Hussein Susi asks whether you can talk a little bit about the roles the Matrix plays in shaping modern narratives around autonomy and free will. I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I think his particular question is especially concerning its impact on technology and AI ethics, and you've already started that answer earlier.
So that's a large question. Um, Philosophers are still up in the air as to whether or not we even have free will. And this is a discussion that's been going on for thousands of years and probably will continue. I prefer to reframe it in terms of agency. The
Mhm.
set of circumstances that determine what we do in life is what is possible for us to do in life. So I have a number of physical, mental, emotional, etc. capacities for doing things as I am sitting here in front of you. What I'm choosing to do right now is sit here in front of you and talk to you like this, but that doesn't mean that I can't do otherwise. The otherwise is where agentive behavior comes in some ways it's truncated by our culture. And so as we integrate things like the newer iterations of the Matrix into our cultural consciousness, most of our cultural consciousness comes from the first movie, we're really going to see this change in ideas about what it's possible to do, sort of expanding that idea of agentive behavior into new potentials.
Great, thank you. And I think opening this up to new potentials connects to our last question, which is by our own Dr. Chris Shin, whose question is more about queer time and imagining or alternative futures. So the question is, if you could talk a little bit more about what queering time means, right? I think so. Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong. If what queering time means to queer temporality and how this paradigm of queering time opens possibilities for alternative futures.
Absolutely. So there's this idea of sort of taking ourselves as queer embodied embodiedness. There's a lot of weirdness in the language here, so I'm doing my best. The taking ourselves out of the narrative and sort of looking at it from a more um, a rounder perspective, stepping outside of it and seeing how moving pieces within it can change things. And so the verb to queer here doesn't entirely mean about sexuality. It's more about the strangeness of it all, about changing the landscape, about using the new the way we have turned our thoughts on their head to and really enhance those possibilities. And it's I think I think this last movie specifically is going to have a massive effect on not only that, but on the literature that comes out of this in relation to cyborgs, in relation to AI, in relation to those large learning models. I jumped on the chance to write this book, and as soon as I watched the trailer for The Matrix Resurrections, I was already on an email to my editors going, would you consider a book on this? Because I knew that this is going to be something huge. This is going to queer the way we see things, including the literature around AI. And I knew I wanted to be at the front and center of this. This is also why I am debuting a new class in fall 25. It's going to be science fiction and the anthropology of transhumanism. It's anthropology 346. And it's going to, I hope, be part of the AI minor. I'm going to pitch that later. I just got the notice that the class was approved today, so I'm going to talk about that with the AI minor shortly. And it's really going to take us from Frankenstein, which was the original created human being, to right now. And wherever right now is when we start the class in 2025, that's where we're going to end up in terms of that narrative. And definitely queer time, queer space, it's all going to be part of that discussion.